class 10th. Today we are going to start with new chapter, chapter 10, the last phase, independence and partition of India from 1942 to 47. Today's topic is Mountbatten Plan and its acceptance by the Congress. We will discuss the following points. So the objectives of today's topic are main provisions of the Mountbatten Plan, the reasons for the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan by the Congress. Now we will discuss the following key terms. Number 1, referendum. It means a general vote by the electorate on a single political question which has been referred to them for a direct decision. Number 2, dominion. It means sovereignty. Number 3, AICC. The All India Congress Committee is the presidium or the central decision making assembly of the Indian National Congress. Number 4, federation. The action of forming states or organization into a single group with centralized control. Mountbatten Plan and its acceptance by the Congress. In March 1947, Lord Mountbatten became the Viceroy of India in place of Lord Wavell. He was a practical man with a realistic approach. He was swift in taking decisions but was not obstinate, means stubborn. When he came to India, the hostility, means conflict between the two communities had reached its peak. In the western provinces, flames of disturbances and disorder were leaping, means jump up skywards. In Bengal, the situation was very explosive. He was so deeply upset by the rapid deterioration, means decline, in communal relations and disturbances that he was eager to transfer power without any delay. He had long discussions with the leaders of the Congress and the League. He found that it was difficult to solve the deadlock between the two parties. He came to the conclusion that the partition alone could solve the Indian problem. So he prepared a plan which provided for the partition of India. It was announced on 3rd June 1947. For the purpose of taking necessary steps for the transfer of power to the Indians, Lord Wavell was recalled and Lord Mountbatten was appointed the new Viceroy. Lord Mountbatten assumed the office of the Viceroy and Governor General in 1947. His immediate task was to restore peace among the warring sections, the Congress and the League, both in his executive council and in the country at large. Lord Mountbatten found that it was difficult to solve the deadlock between the two parties. Mountbatten realized that the cabinet mission plan was unworkable and a partition of India was inevitable. He therefore sought to effect the transfer of power without any delay. So he prepared a plan and put his plan for the partition of India before the big seven leaders Nehru, Patel, Kripalani, Jinnah, Liaquat, Nishtar and Baldev Singh. The Congress accepted the plan and Jinnah undertook to do his utmost to make the plan work. The plan was announced on 3rd June 1947. Following were its chief provisions. Number 1, the country would be divided into two dominions of India and Pakistan. The main points of the plan may be mentioned as follows. Number 1, the country would be divided into two dominions, that is India and Pakistan. Number 2, referendum was to be held in the province of NWFP so as to ascertain whether the people there wished to stay with the Union of India or Pakistan. The direct vote was to be held in NWFP. It was for the two dominions to decide what relations they would have with the British Commonwealth and with each other. The province of Assam, Bengal and Punjab were also to be divided. The partition of Assam, Bengal and Punjab was proposed provided that the legislative assemblies of these provinces decided in favor of partition. The states would have the option to join either of the two dominions of India or Pakistan. The plan provided for the creation of a boundary commission to settle the boundaries of the two dominions in case partition was decided upon. The transfer of power was to be formalized on August 15, 1947. The plan ended with the declaration that the transfer of power would take place not in June 1948 but much earlier than that. The British Parliament would pass an act for the transfer of power before August 15, 1947. The plan was accepted both by the Congress and the League. Freedom was at the doorstep, means entrance, but the long cherished dream of Indian unity lay shattered, means upset. Keeping in view the large scale bloodshed, chaos and anarchy, means lawlessness, the Congress leaders including even Gandhiji accepted the partition but in bitterness and with a heavy heart. They were of the view that a small but strong India is better than a large but weak one. The plan was accepted both by the Congress and the League. The historic pronouncement was received with mixed feelings by the public. The nationalists deplored the partition of India, while the Muslims of the League were not fully satisfied with the way Pakistan was divided. But they accepted the plan for partition. Even Gandhiji accepted the partition with heavy heart. All India Congress Committee accepted the Mountbatten Plan because according to Maulana Azad, the Congress had no other alternative and Gandhiji's view that a strong and small India is better than large and weak one. The reasons for the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan by the Congress may be summarized as under. Number 1. The large-scale violence and communal riots convinced the Congress leaders that there was no alternative to the partition. Sardar Patel opined, means suggested, that refusal of the demand for Pakistan will lead to division of the country into so many Pakistans. The reasons for the acceptance of the Mountbatten Plan by the Congress may be summarized as under. Number 1. Rapid deterioration in communal relations and disturbances convinced the Congress leaders that the only solution to the communal problem lay in the partition of India. In the words of Sardar Patel, if the demand for Pakistan refuse, then it will divide the country into many parts. Number 2. Bitter experience of working with the League in the interim government had convinced the Congress leadership that any joint government with the League would be an exercise in futility, means uselessness. The League had joined the interim government to obstruct and not to cooperate. Experience of working with the League had convinced the Congress that it could not have a joint administration with the League. Number 3. India could not afford a federation with a weak union government. A strong and divided India was better than a undivided but weak India with a weak center. The only alternative to partition was a federation with a weak center. A smaller India with a strong central authority was better than a bigger state with a weak center. A further delaying of partition would have led to further continuation of the British rule. Hence, independence would have been delayed further, which would have led to many problems. Any further continuation of British rule would mean a greater calamity for India. The British were instigating the rulers of the Indian states to remain independent. Hence, partition was the price for immediate independence. Congress leaders were convinced that further delay in partition or transfer of power could lead to a civil war throughout India, which it could ill afford. The Congress leaders were convinced that further delay in the transfer of power could find India in the midst of a civil war. It is quite ironical, means satire, to note that Gandhiji, who had earlier declared that partition would take place only over my dead body, personally argued in favor of partition for an hour or so at the AICC meeting, which passed the resolution for partition. It is quite humorous that earlier Gandhiji was not in favor of partition, but later on he personally favored the partition. So AICC passed the resolution for partition.